Welcome to Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to spreading more empathy throughout the world. Today's episode is brought to you by Grant Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy the show.
So welcome to another episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by the fabulous Amy Wilson, who is founder and CEO of Empathy for Change. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Anita. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Now, you believe that we're here not merely to make a living. You are here as a change leader, community builder, movement maker, and an empathy advocate. Your journey to sparking change started at AmeriCorps, where you led a project to rebuild 50 homes in 4 months in the Gulf Coast after Hurricane Katrina. You were a chief architect at Booz Allen Hamilton, building a culture of innovation movement, which transformed the 100-year-old firm. And later you served for 3 years as a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow, where you created a shared language and led a movement for innovation and change in government. And finally, in 2 weeks, your book comes out, Empathy for Change, in which you hope to inspire others to embrace kindness, to enrich the world, and change the systems around you. What a fabulous bio. I'm so excited to have this conversation. So let's start here. How are you doing? It's just a few days ago. I mean, by the time this comes out, maybe a week or so ago, that the Capitol was under siege. How are you feeling about that? How is everybody in DC doing?
Yeah. Well, to tell you the truth, like I actually posted about this on my social media. It's been an interesting time to be in DC because I've lived in DC for about 13 years. And I've seen, I guess the span of 2 presidents in this time, and now going to be a third coming up. But it's also interesting too, because like this is my home, DC, right? I live a little further up. I can see the Washington Monument from my window. I can see the White House from my window, like far off in the distance. Not the Capitol, but I didn't see that happening. But it's kind of like it feels like we've been violated in a lot of ways. And I think in a lot of ways, the past 4 years, we've been violated over and over and over again. And like there's like a lot of things that have been happening in our country. And so this is, I was talking to a friend, it was like, I thought that when we were crying the day after the election in 2016, we thought it was going to be bad, but we didn't know that it was going to be this bad. And what's interesting is a part of my story is, and it affects me personally because I was working at the White House and as for the Obama administration in 2016 when Trump was elected president, and it was quite a experience to be there. And I've seen a changing city. Like this city is like the most democratic place in the United States, right? So we are just like, we're all about like democratic values. We live in a bubble, but then we've got this like other bubble that's like over the Capitol, and we got the White House. So, and so it's been hard to like process it because I also was in the White House. I actually just decided to stay into the Trump White House to do this work, to lead this work around changing government, to lead innovation.gov, which I was the director of, and I coded and built with hundreds of people across government. But then on the other side, I was also building the Better Government movement. And it was people who are about 5,000 people joined in 2 years. And it was just like people who are standing up and saying, you know what? I'm not waiting for my leadership to change. I'm going to change. I'm going to help the world. I'm going to change from the inside out. And it's based on this belief that culture change happens because of a movement and not a mandate that's happening. And these people are stepping into it. And I talk about this in my book, but to make it just really short, I ended up having to get to a position where I have to speak truth to power in the Trump administration. I say what I need to say, and I get fired. And they just, and in retaliation, they destroyed innovation.gov in front of my eyes. And they also told me that I could not convene the Better Government movement again. And it was dead. It was dead. And it was traumatic for me. And it's not just because of this, but I have PTSD and anxiety. I talk about openly because I think we need to talk about mental health a lot. But I have these things. And so I'm personally wrapped up in what happened, right? I'm personally wrapped up in and I have been affected by it. And I've seen the destructive force. And that experience led me to write this book, right? And led me to realize that in order for us to change the world around us, we're not doing it right. Things aren't happening in the right direction. So we need to change, and we need to we need to do stuff. So I healed from that experience. I, stepped into my own power, and I'm now stepping into this book and writing and hoping that other people will listen so that we can all step into our power so we can co-create the world around us, So that's the story. You didn't even know this story because, we just met today, but that's the thing. I'm personally affected by it, and so it hits me deeper because I know what's at stake and what has been destroyed. And so I just, I've been taking care of myself the past few days, and healing and, relaxing, meditating, being mindful, and hugging people virtually as much as possible and healing. So. I am the best hugger, by the way. So
can't wait to meet you in DC to hug you.
So you're welcome to come.
COVID is in our in our rear view mirror. Wow, that is a really compelling story. And I've often heard it said that you write the book you need to read. So sounds like this was a cathartic book that not only brought you to the other side, but will help a lot of people see the possibility and the potential that exists for us to leverage empathy for change. It was so interesting. I knew your book was called Empathy for Change, and I thought it could also be called Empathy for a Change. So how have you weaved empathy and change together in your book?
Yes, well, that is a good question. So, the book is called Empathy for Change. So I'm a bit of a interesting person in the sense that I'm an empath. Empathy is my biggest strength, and I'm also a highly sensitive person. So this is a really unique mixture of people. So I really care and deeply about people. At the end of the day, if empathy is my biggest strength, so I'm always going to bring empathy to everything that I do. But I'm also a change maker. So I can't extract both of these places from myself, right? So I always, wherever I am, I always try to think about how can we make this better. So I literally have thought about this in a big way, and based on a really tragic thing that happened when I was working as a White House Presidential Innovation Fellow in the Trump administration. I had this mixture of values that really wasn't matching with what I was doing. So it led me down this path to start writing this book, to start looking at both sides of who I am as an empathy person and a movement maker, and seeing how does that work in today's world. So what I found is that the events of the past few years and the work that we've been doing shows that we're at a turning point in our country, and we are going down this path of narcissism that's happening. And we have to make a decision. Are we going down this path of narcissism, and research is showing that, or are we going down the path of empathy and leaning into each other? And a lot of that is coming from leadership that we're having in the world, and we're learning new ways of being. But what's also interesting is that our research says that empathy is a conscious choice that we make with each other, and that many people relegate that to their subconscious. It's not a conscious choice all the time. So if it's a subconscious thing, there's a lot of things in modern day society that gets in the way of empathy. There's presenting itself like the isms, like sexism, racism, ageism, ableism, right? So many people stop seeing people for who they are, and they have a hard time experiencing that. So I believe that the solution to that is to veer towards empathy rather than narcissism. We need to have innovation. We need to think in a bigger way. And right, that's like the core of who I am. The past decade, I've been leaders of innovation. But I have this kind of like belief that I don't really like the word innovation. But at the end of the day, what are we really trying to do with innovation? Create positive change. And so for me, that means empathy plus action. Mm-hmm. So if we can truly empathize with people and then come back around and then act upon that empathy that we have, then we're going to create a better world, right?
No, I'm just reacting because it's so singing to the choir. Do you know that my PhD dissertation title is A Pedagogy of Empathic Action? So acting on empathy for others. And my book was actually, initially empathic action, but I'm working with an agent who, didn't think that rolled off the tongue very well. I was like in love with empathic action for a decade. There's a lot of history of empathic action on the internet with my work, but then I changed it to, because we deliberated and we got to a different title, which I've now gotten really excited about. And when you were talking about making the choice to empathize, I completely agree. And that's why I feel comfortable referring to my work as purposeful empathy, right? So having empathy on purpose. Yeah. So I really, okay, so we're sisters. We're in the sisterhood of empathy here. So what role does empathy play in change to you?
So that's an interesting thing. So you probably have studied this because we're soul sisters here. We figured this out, is that there's three kinds of empathy, right? There's cognitive empathy. And so if you look at my book cover, it has a head, a heart, and a hand on it. And that is very central to the belief and the things that I have in my book. And a lot of people really like it. I tend to like it. It's like primary colors and things like that. But so the idea is really linked to what I think we need to do. And we need to take empathy. We have to have a better understanding of empathy before we can actually change the world around us. So that's linked to cognitive, emotional, and compassionate empathy. So cognitive empathy is the head. Is like, am I willing to take your perspective? That's where the choice comes in. And it's both a choice, and you only have empathy for people that you value, right? So if you don't value people, that person, you're not going to try to have empathy for them. So there's some like interventions you can do that place. So it could be a gender, a race, or an ethnicity. But then emotional is the heart. And that's where I'm able to feel my feelings and emotions. But it also requires you to have an understanding of yourself first, right? And what are emotions and feelings and things that I'm having so that I can be in community with you, right? And because often, and I have done this all over and over and over again in my life, but I've gone through like a lot of like really deep changes in my life. But we often go into this place where we just react rather than respond. And so we're always reacting to things, but how can we get to a place where we can actually know what we're saying and then respond in a very good way? And so I talk about how you might do these things in the book. And then there's compassionate empathy, which is the third kind, which I call the hand. And this is where I'm taking your perspective, I'm feeling it with you, but I'm willing to help you if needed. And so there's this belief that I'm like, okay, I'm here not just feeling for you, but feeling with you, right? And so that's the definition of that. So, but what's interesting, and I've been teaching social change and innovation for many years now, and I've been leading it. And what I have seen is that the world around us has been designed for people. And with all of these systems of oppression and inequities that are happening in the world. And some of them are designed that way, but then others are unintended consequences of the work, right? So take, Facebook, Twitter, and all these different things. Like they created them with an intention in mind, but then they're having negative consequences for all of society with like the mis and disinformation that's happening out in the world. So why is that so? Because you're more likely to lack empathy if you're wealthy and if you have power. And so you can only have empathy for people that you value, right? So these systems have been set up. And then, but research has shown that those with like lower socioeconomic status actually have to rely on community to get through their day. And that is why they have more empathy. And so at the end of the day, my thinking to how empathy and change is linked is because can we actually live fully with our head, our heart, and our hand to be willing to be that change and be in community with others? And that thing that flips around there is this idea that as empathy is feeling with people and not for them, we need to design with and not for. And so I find that as the greatest form of empathy, right? We can actually truly know we can't actually know somebody's experience, but we must give power and agency to those to help them achieve their goals in life, right? It requires some like rewiring in our head. It requires a lot of these different things. And in my research, there's 4 elements that kind of need to go with empathy that have come out. And I'm happy to talk about it. I don't know if you have any questions about what I've chatted about there.
Well, let's go there, because the next question I was going to ask is, I know about the 4 elements that need to be present with empathy to live on purpose, right? Is something that you care about. So why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Consistently in the research that I've talked to and engaged with people. So I went out and talked to dozens of people who are leading with empathy, and also they have this mission to change systems and the world around us, right? So I have talked to these organizations, really try to like get to know them. And so the things that have come out of these is there's 4 elements that I bring together. Is like, number 1, dignity. And it is Dr. Donna Hicks talks about the dignity model, and I'm quoting here. I have it in front of me right now, but it says, we are inherently valuable and worthy. Dignity is an essential element in human existence. We're born with it. We are invaluable, priceless, and irreplaceable. So if everybody like comes in, and if we get to this place of like everybody has dignity and everybody is irreplaceable and precious, then that actually changes the dialogue when it comes around empathy. And number 2 is humility. So Antoinette Carroll, who created this organization called the Creative Reaction Lab in St. Louis, Missouri, she's a goddess, and I love her 100%. And I feature her heavily in this book because what she's doing is, and she has affected a lot of my ideas around equity and empathy. And she says that we need to have humility with this idea. And this is what she says in this. She created this, she and her organization created this thing called the Equity-Centered Community-Based Design. And they say, humility is recognizing the influence of your own biases and perspectives when trying to understand another's emotions, thoughts, experiences, and actions. Empathy is the active attempt to understand another person's perspective by imagining how you would feel, think, or act if put in their situation. Empathy and humility help us understand others while also acknowledging our biases. Mm-hmm. So it's that feeling of like, I'm not better than you. We're in this thing together, this world together. The next thing I would say is also curiosity. It's a strong desire to know and learn something about each other, right? So we need to like develop those kinds of things. And I'm like, okay, like I just met you, but like I'm interested to hear what you have to say, right? And I know that comes in spades for me, right? Like I'm so fascinated by people. And then the last one is equity. And this is a word that you hear over and over again. It's like kind of a buzzword that people have been using, but we have to really get to the heart of like, what are our, we talk about white fragility. We talk about all these different things about how can we create more diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to bring back Antoinette into the conversation here, because in my interview with her, she said this: in the United States, equity matters because of our current lack of it, especially amongst marginalized communities such as Black and Latinx populations, females, transgender individuals, people with disabilities. And for example, the Black and Latinx populations face disproportionate racial and economic inequalities or inequities, limiting social, economic, and cultural growth due to systems of policy, education, housing, etc. And these disparities propagate because of the barriers that have been built between the residents. And so those are the four elements, dignity, humility, curiosity, and equity. Those are the four elements that kind of come up within our research. And then the solution, answer for us to do that is for us as individuals in the design process, and we're designing the world around us, is to have both intention. So at the beginning of the process, understand what is our purpose, what is our intention with the world, and then come back around and look at impact and really measure and ask people what the impact is to their communities. Are you actually making the intention that you hope to intended to make? And then I think the future where we're getting to is going from, shifting of power from for to with, right? Designing with each other. So how can we get power to people who are marginalized, who have the inequities happening? How can they design the world around them with the way they want to have it designed? So that's what I would say.
So how do you feel the pandemic has shifted opportunities for empathy to show up, while also sparking some change, some much needed change?
Yeah. So what's interesting is that I started writing this book in the middle of 2019. I started this in the middle of 2019, and then I wrote my first draft by the end of 2019, and then I joined a fellowship that I live in Washington, D.C. right now, but I was going to San Francisco for this fellowship. So I packed up all my stuff, moved to San Francisco, and then I go there. So, and then I get to San Francisco, and I'm only there for 3 months before the pandemic hits, and I have to come back to DC. So I actually wrote I revised my book during the pandemic. So it's very cathartic for me to write this book at the time, because it's exactly speaking to what the world is like right now. So the pandemic has created an enormous problem around the world, and it's not something that's easily solved. There's no one silver bullet solution, but multiple approaches that are going to get us out of this scenario and to heal the world, and to, with vaccines, but then how do you bring people back? And this is something that we're kind of like in a place we don't know. We don't understand what's happening right now. So it is everything to, and it has everything to do with empathy and change. Here's another quote from my book, because I'm just like doing all the quotes today from the book.
Sure, your book's coming out in 2 weeks. Let's say that again.
Let's do it. So I read this at the beginning of the pandemic as I was writing this book, and I was like, yes, this is it. And that fellowship that I was doing in San Francisco was a technology policy fellowship. So I've been studying how does technology shape empathy, and like how is and vice versa, and on all these different things. And so it's from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology Review. It's kind of like interesting that is 2 technologies in a row, but he's the editor at large. His name is David Rotman. And he says, the pandemic has made clear this festering problem. The US is no longer very good at coming up with new ideas and technologies relevant to our most basic needs. We're great at devising shiny, mainly software-driven bling that makes our lives more convenient in most ways. But we're far less accomplished at reinventing healthcare, rethinking education, making food production and distribution more efficient, and in general, turning our technical know-how loose on the largest sectors of the economy. that's something I read at the beginning. It's an op-ed that he wrote, and I was like, yes, I can see that. But what's happening with the pandemic is that it is what we call, like, and I talk about this in the book, a VUCA problem, right? So VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain. Yeah, you're like mouthing it with me. You're like, I got this. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So it's volatile because we can't predict what's happening. It's uncertain for sure, right? We don't know when we'll go back to where we were before. We're still in that like that world of like limbo area. It's complex. It's affecting many systems we rely on, such as government for testing and contact tracing, our healthcare system for recovery and ventilators. Our economy is slipping with a drop in the stock market and 30 million people unemployed or more than that. And then also it's ambiguous because it's unclear what's the best course of action, as proven by the mis and disinformation being shared from the White House and other sources too. So the pandemic creates this place where we have to rely on ourselves, right? And to have and community again, right? So we have a sense of isolation, but we now need to come together and to rely on community. And you're seeing that with like mutual aid organizations coming together to help other people. You're also seeing the systems break down that we have, like, Congress was having a hard time passing a bill to give benefits to people, pandemic benefits out there. But what's interesting is in the pandemic, and I have a whole chapter about the pandemic because I was like, this is something going on. Like it's like a case study of what's happening in the world. And so, but there's what Rebecca Solnit talks about this, and she's like an activist and written a bunch of different books on this topic. And she says that in times of crisis and need, we become more pro-social. So that means we become more community oriented and more focused on people than we do in other times. So this VUCA scenario that we're in forces us to see the humanity in each other. But then also, things are changing around us. Like, we're on Zoom right now, right? Like, but then our Zoom most people didn't know what Zoom was, or very few people knew what Zoom was, but now the whole world knows what Zoom is.
It's a verb. It's a verb.
It's like, it's a verb. It's part of this. But also, like talking in the technology sense, the people who are in technology, who are like using these technologies, like technology has moved faster than like move 5 years ahead just in this pandemic because of the need for us to do this virtual engagement, right? And I was actually talking to one of my mentors yesterday, and he was like, yeah, like, it's my experience at the MVA was the fastest experience I've ever had in my life because I had an appointment, right? And they don't want to have a lot of people in there. And I was like, that's interesting. The pandemic just changed that experience for you, which everybody says the MVA experience or the Motor Vehicles Association experience is always terrible. Everybody hates to go there. But I'm like, it took a pandemic for us to get to that place of pushing forward. And now I'm like, well, now they have this appointment system in there. So now they've got it. Like, why would they do away with it now, right? And now it's making the world better, right? So changes are happening, and we're only just beginning this change. And I was just actually not in Brazil because it would have been fabulous if I was in Brazil, but I was speaking on a panel for Innovation Week, panel around policy innovation, but also how is the pandemic shaping our world. So, I have that link on my social media and stuff like that. People can learn more about like the conversation we were having, but it's just really fascinating that around the world, we're all experiencing the same thing, our shared humanity, but also it's forcing the government to change. It's forcing us to change. It's forcing all these different things. So we are confronting change full stop and every day.
So I wish you all the best with your book launch. We'll have information about how to get your book in the description down below.
Sure.
And please, let's stay in touch. You're an empathy enthusiast. We're part of the sisterhood. Let's go out and change the world. We need it.
Do it.
Thanks,
you,
Amy,
Anita.
so much. It was really great to chat with you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next episode of Purposeful Empathy. Have a good one.
What if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free of your thinking clutter, make that important decision, and liberate you from what's holding you back? At Grand Huron International, you get to choose the coach of your choice. You get to do so anytime and from anywhere. Visit grandhuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.